What's up everybody, I'm Seth Fowler and today I'm redesigning a very popular sneaker, and that shoe is the Adidas YEEZY 500. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If this is your first time watching my channel, make sure to subscribe down below if you want to see more content just like this. Also make sure to give me a follow on Instagram and on Twitter at RealSethFowler. If you've never seen one of my If I Design videos before, basically what I do is I take a popular sneaker like the YEEZY 500 and I redesign it in a way that I would design it if I was given the opportunity. However, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So rather than redesigning the sneaker in the way that I would design it, which would make it look very different because I'm not a huge fan of the YEEZY 500 visually, instead what I'm going to do is redesign this sneaker as if it was a V2 or a second version of the shoe like Kanye has been known to do. And by that I mean I'm going to take the sneaker and redesign it so that it's more in line with the newer YEEZY design language. So to give you guys an idea of what that is, I've got the brand new YEEZY 700 V3, and as you can tell this shoe is very, I guess you'd call it organic. It's a very organic looking sneaker and it actually kind of looks like a skeleton, let's be honest. Actually, I'm just realizing this now. It kind of looks like this sneaker died and this is its skeleton. And for some reason, visually, I like the 700 V3 better than the 500. I think it's because it's slightly more minimal, it's a little bit cleaner, and it's a little bit more, refined, I guess. So what I'm going to attempt to do in this video is create a rendering or a concept of the YEEZY 500 V2 and make it look much more organic and much more futuristic. But on a slightly different note, I know I don't do a huge amount of If I Design videos on my channel and I do more reviews and top 10s, and that's mainly just because If I Design videos take a really long time to do. They take at least a day of filming and then probably another day of editing. It's a lot of work, it really is, but at the end of the day, designing things is my passion. It's what I went to school for. I went to school for industrial design, and so these are the kind of videos that really drive me. And the reason I haven't been doing so many If I Design videos on the channel recently is because I just finished up designing my own sneaker, which, as some of you guys know, is the We Are Underdogs Seth Fowler origin. For those of you that don't know, this is my collaboration with Portuguese sneaker brand We Are Underdogs. It's a shoe that I designed from start to finish, from sketching all the way to flying out to Portugal and checking out the first pullover of this sneaker, and it's finally releasing in May, which I'm so excited about, and you can actually pre-order a pair for yourself in the link at the top of the description. Not only that, but you can actually check out the whole design process behind this sneaker on my channel. I've done videos of every single part of production, so if you guys want to check that out, whether it's a sketching video or how the sneaker was made in the factory, it's all linked in the description below. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into designing the YEEZY 500 V2. Okay, so the first thing that I've done is quickly sketched out a standard YEEZY 500 so that we can use this as the base, so that we can edit this and change this design and try and keep the shoe relatively similar to the original. So what I'm going to do now is actually sketch over this and try and create maybe 3 different concepts of 3 different directions that this design could take, and then we'll pick one and move forward from there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is drop the opacity of the original sketch, create a new layer, and sketch over top of it. Now my favorite part of the Adidas YEEZY 500 is actually the midsole and the outsole tooling. And to be fair, that was taken from another Adidas sneaker from the 80s, I think a basketball model. So what I'm going to do is try and maintain some of this shape, but adjust it a little bit and try and update it. And even though there is already a high top version of this shoe, I feel like the V2 version of the 500 would probably be a low top to keep in line with the original 500s. So what I'm going to do is design a low top and go from there. I think the first direction I'm going to go is actually accentuating some of the curves of the midsole, and not only that, also smoothing it out. So if you look at the original YEEZY 500, you'll see that they've added this sort of grid texture, which I believe was from the original Adidas basketball sneaker. But if you look at some of the more recent Adidas YEEZY shoes, they all have very smooth midsoles, and even though they still have an organic overall shape, the texture is almost basically just a gloss or a semi-gloss. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a midsole that still has some sort of organic form to it, but it's going to be much smoother and I'm going to lose all the texture. Not only that, but one thing I really like about the YEEZY 500 is this sort of fuse overlay panel, or I guess very thin rubber panel that covers up or separates the midsole from the upper of the shoe. And right now it's just kind of a straight line, which I think is fine, but it's kind of boring. So what I'm going to do is do something which might actually up the production costs pretty dramatically, but again, it's just a concept, so it doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do is try and make this, this rubber panel kind of mimic the shape of the midsole. I feel like that would look a lot cooler. As you can probably tell, I'm going for a much more organic look. I just feel like that's the way that Kanye and the YEEZY team would do it with the 500 V2, just because that's sort of the direction that they're taking. I don't know how organic they would get with it, but I'm just gonna play with it. So one of the signature details of the YEEZY 500 are these sort of circular or round shaped blobs that kind of puff out from the side of the sneaker because they're sort of a foam, I guess, or a mesh covering up some sort of foam. And they give this shoe a very unique look. So I want to make sure that I'm maintaining this design detail because this is one of the most unique features of the shoe. And while I'm going to change the shape of these bubbles, maybe make them bigger or smaller, I'm not sure yet, but I think they need to remain there. Well, they definitely got bigger, that's for sure. One detail that I think I might add is something that I might pull off the Yeezy 451, the shoe that hasn't actually been released yet, but a shoe that has been leaked forever. And that's this sort of, was it foam fingers that kind of wrap around the side of the shoe, or foam spikes that come up from the midsole. I think it's an interesting detail. It makes the shoe look much more ferocious, I guess, if that's a good way to describe it. And I kind of like the way that they would look on this shoe. So I'm gonna add a few of those, see how they work on this shoe, and if they don't work, I'll get rid of them. But for right now, I'm gonna try it. Personally, I don't really like the little ovals that they use as eyelets on the side of the shoe. I feel like it's a little bit too insect-like, so I'm gonna get rid of that. The eyelets will still remain there, and there'll still be some sort of bump there for the eyelets, but I think I might just get rid of those ovals altogether. Or maybe I should make them less round and more kind of like diamond-shaped or puck-shaped. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't mind them more angular. So at this point, let me turn off the layer underneath and see how the new version looks on its own, which I'm kind of worried because I don't know if I filled out every little detail of the shoe, so it might just kind of look like a really bad line drawing, but let's see how it looks. It's not bad. I actually really don't mind it at all. It's definitely more futuristic. It's definitely more out there. It's definitely sharper and more angular. I dig it. I think that's good for the first concept. So let's keep this one and move on to the next one. So for this next one, even though I made the original one much more angular, I'm gonna make this one even more angular. I'm gonna make the midsole and the outsole of the shoe even more pronounced and see what happens. I don't think I'm gonna go as futuristic with the upper. I think I'm gonna keep it more traditional, but let's just see what happens. That's definitely a different take on the midsole. It looks a lot like the Boost You Wear 2.0s, actually, now that I'm looking at it. I mean, it makes sense because the midsole is pretty similar to that shoe, but let's keep going. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to change the direction of this bump right here and make it go in the same sort of direction as the bump that's a little bit farther back. And not as pronounced, but still there. Kind of like that. That's not too bad, and I think what I'm going to do with this one too is the same thing I did with the last one, which is take the fuse overlay and make it fit the shape of the bumps. I'm also going to give this shoe a tongue that's more similar to the tongue on the Yeezy 700 V3, which is kind of like, I guess, an angle that goes up and then it's cut flat across the top. So it's sort of like a weird U shape. I just like the way that looks, and I feel like a lot more of the newer Yeezy sneakers are doing that, like the Quantums and the... I know there's more. I know there's more Yeezy shoes that do it, so I'm going to change the tongue from the standard tongue to more of the newer Yeezy tongue. Because I just feel like it looks better. It looks cleaner. You know what? I also kind of want to make this bump a little bit wider. See how that looks. There we go. Big boy bump now. That didn't come out exactly how I wanted it to. You know what else? I might actually get rid of this suede panel that's right here. I had it on the original concept, but I think I'm going to get rid of this and make it just all part of the same upper, like a one-piece kind of upper with holes in it. Let's see how that looks. It's different, and I actually don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool. Maybe if I add like another, I don't know, like another leather piece there? No, maybe not. You know what? I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of that stuff there. I'm going to give it something more like maybe that. Maybe what it needs are like little flaps for the laces. Little lace flaps. I don't know if that's the move or if that's ridiculous, but about to find out. That's not terrible, actually. I kind of dig that. Let's stick with that. Let's stick with that. Okay, now that we've got this concept generally filled out, let's turn off the original sketch and see what it looks like. It's alright. It looks a lot like an 80s basketball sneaker. It looks a lot like an 80s basketball sneaker, and I don't know if that's exactly what we're going for, but I don't mind it. I wonder if I can make these little bubbles more organic shaped. so that they seem a little bit more like they fit together. I don't think I'm in love with it, but it's good to have this concept. Okay, so now for this last one, I'm gonna go completely different. I'm gonna try and make this shoe very minimal and very modern looking. So that means that I'm gonna take this midsole and maintain most of the original shape, but really simplify it. The sort of inspiration behind this midsole and outsole is the Yeezy 380, which has a very simple and subtle, just completely flat, completely smooth. And while I want to maintain some of the curvature and some of the bumps on this midsole, I do want to keep it pretty flat. That is different. It's definitely different. You know what? It's weird. I actually don't mind it. I didn't think I was going to like this one, but I really don't mind it. Much simpler and much more clean. Maybe there's an internal lacing system inside, so you've got one outer and one inner. So it kind of alternates between going through the holes and then going through some lace loops on the inside. I don't know. I know I'm adding more detail on this concept than other concepts, or at least bolding out some of the details a little bit more. And that's because this concept is so much more simple than the other ones that I feel like it needs a little bit more definition. So let me turn off the bottom sketch and let's see what we've got. I actually think it's kind of clean. I don't know if these sort of oval shapes are the exact shape we'd want to go with. Maybe it'd be more sort of organic, like more of a, I don't know, something more like a amorphous blob type thing, but I don't hate it. I really don't. Cool, so let me put all three of the concepts together and we can take a look at them and see which direction we want to take. So there we go. Here are all three of the concepts that we have next to the original shoe. And I'm going to be honest with you, I see a pretty obvious winner, at least in my opinion. There's one that really stands out to me. It looks the most interesting and also the most sort of futuristic and realistic as to something that could actually happen. Now with that said, I think I'm going to incorporate some details that I liked from some of the other concepts into this concept to make it much more finished looking. And it should be really fun to do. So out of all of these three concepts, the one that I'm drawn to the most is actually, funnily enough, the first concept. I just really like the way it turned out. I think it looks really clean. I think it's different. I think it definitely fits within that sort of Yeezy design aesthetic. I feel like concept 2 right here was definitely a nice looking shoe, but it looks a lot more like an 80s basketball sneaker, especially with some of the more exaggerated midsole details and this sort of, I guess, almost puzzle-like upper construction or upper detailing. And then this third concept, while it's interesting, it definitely needs a lot more refinement, and I feel like I could have spent more time on it, let's be honest, but I kind of knew at this point that I wanted to go with the first concept, and so I wasn't going to waste my time with it. So let's take this first one, let's refine it, and let's make it a really clean looking rendering. So what I've done at this point is taken the original sketch from that other Photoshop file and put it into a whole new Photoshop file. If you guys didn't know, I'm working in Photoshop 20 right now. I'm also using a Wacom, I guess 20-inch tablet. I'm not exactly sure what it, maybe 32-inch. Not totally sure. It's from like 2012, so it's definitely older. Actually, come to think of it, if you guys are interested, I've linked some newer tablets in the description below if you guys want to try sketching for yourself. But what I'm going to do now is drop the opacity of this sketch and then sketch over top of it and create a refined version. So let's start with the midsole and outsole. The reason I keep redrawing certain sections is because I want the curve to be perfect, and I want it to be a smooth, quick curve, and not one that looks all jittery, or at least not one that's sketched all jittery. So I'm trying to do it in one smooth, quick motion to make it look as clean as possible. Getting this line to be how I want it is proving to be a little bit harder than I expected. Cool, that looks pretty clean for the midsole. Pretty happy with that. Let me start a new layer for the upperage so I don't ruin the lines that I created for the midsole. And while I'm at it, why don't I also name that layer too? Because I always forget to name them and then I get everything mixed up. Now originally what I was planning to do was have this thin rubber area actually perfectly match the shape of the midsole and be sort of equidistant at all points. However, I feel like that's kind of boring, so what I might do is just kind of make it be similar to the line of the midsole, but also have its own sort of flavor and its own life, so hopefully that looks okay. Not bad. I kind of dig that. I think that looks really cool. Cool, let's keep going. So now that we've traced over the concept with a much cleaner line, I'm going to go in and just double check that I'm happy with everything and all the little details. And also now that I'm looking at it without that sketch underneath, I want to clean up some other things too. So let's go in and do that. So overall, now that I've gone in and sort of refined the design and cleaned it up a little bit, pretty happy with it. I think what I want to do now is go in and start blocking some color and start making it look a little bit more 3D. So why don't we do that? I think the colorway that I'm going to go with is actually the Yeezy 500 High Slate's colorway, maybe a slight variation on this because I really love the way this looks. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to give these sort of bubbly areas of the shoe this neoprene sort of feel that they have on the 500 highs, or if I want to go with the mesh from the original 500s. I might even go for more of like a prime knit look too. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll deal with that last. We're gonna fill in the color first and then see what happens. So let's do it. And I'm actually gonna start off with the midsole color first. So let's give it sort of a light tan, and then I might actually make the outsole gum. I feel like that'd be cool. So maybe like a sail color on the midsole and then a gum outsole, or like a light brown outsole. Let's try it and see how it looks. There's no reason why I'm filling in one area first over another area. I'm just doing it because that's what I feel like. So, also, if you're wondering, the reason I put this checkerboard background behind this is so that I can actually see where I'm coloring in, because this is such a light color. If I did it on white, it would be really difficult to see if I left any holes or areas that I didn't color. So that's the reason for that. Maybe gum isn't the move. I don't know, I kind of dig it. Let's stick with it for now. We can always change it. I don't know what it is about this colorway, but I just think it's dope. So we're going to stick with the dark navy look and see how it looks on the shoe. Maybe I should make it gray. No, dark navy. We're doing dark navy. Okay, so there is the thin blue area. Now what I'm going to do is add a lighter blue to the suede panels, I guess. So let's do that and see how it looks. Okay, so now that I've created a very messy outline, I need to go back in and erase some things. I shouldn't have been so messy with it. I don't know what I was thinking. So now that I've got the suede color in, I'm going to go in with the leather color, and I think what I might actually do is do that layer underneath the suede layer so that I can be a bit messier. So, and I think like with the Slate highs, I'm going to go for a slightly maybe darker shade of navy to sort of contrast the suede a little bit, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so now that the leather's in, I'm going to go in with the bubble things. I'm not exactly sure what to call them, but we're going to call them bubble things for now. They also seem to be a slightly more saturated shade of blue than the rest of the upper, so we're going to do it that way as well. Make them slightly more bluey blue, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. Now that that's filled in, I'm going to fill in the tongue and also the padding around the heel. And I think I'm going to use a slightly different shade of blue, but still pretty similar. I'm starting to look at the colorway, and I feel like it looks a lot like that pair of Air Jordan 11s from like 2 years ago that was navy and gum on the outsole. So I think what I'm going to do is change the outsole color to not the exact same shade of tan as the rest of the midsole, but to a similar shade of tan. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with the way that looks, actually. I'm pretty stoked on it, to be honest. So let me actually add laces, because I'm realizing I'm missing laces, and I feel like that might tie everything together. Ah, that was a pun. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but it happened. There we go. Pretty happy with that. Let's fill in these laces really quickly. Hopefully that adds to the shoe. Nice, I'm pretty happy with how those turned out. So what I'm going to do now is actually find some images online of textures like suedes and leathers and maybe some meshes and kind of overlay them to make this shoe look a little bit more photorealistic. And then I'm going to go in and shade it. So let me go do that and I'll be right back. So as you can see, I found a leather texture and also a suede texture. There it is. And I'm going to overlay them really quickly and hopefully they look good. So let's see how this works. Let's do the suede first. For some reason my page keeps shifting over. I'm not sure why, but it keeps happening. It's pissing me off. Go to the suede layers, delete that, delete this, great. Then I'm going to multiply these layers. There we go. Now we've got suede. Awesome, it looks like I can actually just throw the leather on like this and be good to go. So let's do that. Pop, pop, pop. Perfect. Awesome, now we've got some textures in there, which I think look great. I think it really adds some nice dimension to the shoe. So what I'm gonna do now is actually start shading because at this point I feel like unless we add a mesh to those little bubble areas, that's all we're gonna do. And honestly, I kind of like the idea of not having a mesh. I kind of like the idea of just keeping it this sort of neoprene feel. I just feel like that looks cooler and more modern and more futuristic. So we're gonna keep it like this for now. You know, the more that I look at this, the more that I think that maybe the mesh areas or neoprene areas, these little bubble guys here, maybe instead of being either of those materials, they should be prime knit, kind of like the Yeezy 700 V3. I feel like that would be cool to try, and even if it's just sketching in like sort of a wavy pattern to see how it looks, I don't know. Let me try it. So now that I've drawn this sort of overlay, I'm going to fill it in and then erase the parts that aren't on the prime knit panel. So let's see how it looks. So now what I'm going to do is select these bubble areas, invert the selection, and then delete everything that wasn't inside them, and see how it looks. Not sure how I feel about it. Let's multiply it, see what happens. I don't like it at all. So I'm just going to get rid of that, completely scrap it, and just make them neoprene bubbles. I feel like that looks better. So now that we've gotten past that whole prime knit fiasco, what I'm going to do is go in and start shading the shoe. And I'm going to start on the midsole and the outsole. So just a tip, and it might totally be obvious to you, but whenever you're shading your sketch, it always helps to have something that's similar to what you're drawing next to you. So you can base your shading off reality. Because a lot of times when you're shading something just from memory or just from your own mind, you miss certain things. Like you don't understand how some of the shadow might fall on certain curves of the item that you're drawing. So for example, this shoe, like the midsole is so weirdly shaped that I don't really know exactly how I would shade it if I wasn't looking at this shoe. So it definitely helps to have this next to me so I don't miss like random shadows that come up like right here on the edge of this sort of bump thing. So always helps to have that. Cool, so there is the initial midsole and outsole shading. Obviously, we're gonna get more detailed as we get deeper into the sketch. So what I'm gonna do now is move on to the upper and get the shading on the upper to the same level that we have on the midsole and the outsole. Okay, so at this point, now that I've got a lot of the textured stuff shaded, I'm gonna go in and shade the neoprene areas, which should be pretty easy because they're all kind of flat, but we'll see what happens. I'm also gonna use my pair of 500 High Slates for reference. So now that I've got the neoprene on the side of the shoe done, now what I'm going to do is go in and do the same thing on the tongue and also shade the sock liner and the laces. Great, so at this point, because all the initial shading's in, I'm gonna go back in and do much more detailed shading and also add a couple details, like maybe adding some texture on the outsole and possibly some, stitching details on the upper. To be honest, even though I don't love this sort of grid texture, I think I might incorporate it in some way, or maybe just these little stripes right here, just to give the outsole some extra detail because I feel like it needs it. Right now it's a little bit too plain. That actually kind of gives it some texture. I kind of dig that. Let's keep that. That's definitely a bit more shaded. Now what I'm going to do is go in and shade the midsole again. Make it a little bit more detailed. So now the next step, or I guess steps, is to do the same thing that we did to the midsole and the outsole to the rest of the sneaker. So at this point, I'm actually pretty happy with how the sneaker's coming out. I feel like the shading is just about done. What I want to do now is go back in and clean up some of these lines, especially where some of the shading overlapped, and just give it a sort of nice bold outline, and we should be done with it. But before I do the outline, I'm going to clean up all the areas that I feel like could use a little bit of TLC. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with it. I think I'm going to add some shading underneath the shoe to make it kind of pop off the page a little bit, but then I'm pretty much done. Now what I'm going to do is add a really quick background, just to make it pop a little bit. Let's make it cream. I feel like cream's better. Boom, baby. There we go. That looks very Yeezy. That looks very Yeezy. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow underneath it. Let me just throw in a really quick signature and we're done. So here it is, my take on the Yeezy 500 V2, and I'm actually pretty happy with how it came out. I tried to keep the overall silhouette and shape pretty similar to the original Yeezy 500 because if you look at some of the V2 versions of other Yeezy sneakers like the 700 V1 to V2 or the Yeezy 350 V1 to V2, the shoe doesn't change that much from the V1 version to the V2 version, and that's usually to keep some consistency when it comes to a line of sneakers. So I tried to do that with my shoe, and I also tried to incorporate some of the more organic shapes that we've gotten used to with some of the newer Yeezy sneakers. For example, I added some of the Yeezy 451 spikes towards the toe, and while it's not in the same material, it has the same sort of shape. Not only that, I tried to make the bubble things on the side of the shoe much more organic and flow much better, and the other major change was making the midsole and the outsole more dramatic. I feel like they're more interesting now and they have more personality. But overall, I'm stoked on the shoe. I'd love to know your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget, if you would like to grab a pair of the We Are Underdogs Seth Fowler Origins, they're linked in the top of the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.